And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Greetings, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook for this weekend for Saturday and Sunday. And this outlook is from Friday, February 23rd, 2024. So what's going to go on over this weekend is as of this Friday, we have a weak low pressure wave that'll work up into the northwestern Gulf by Saturday morning. This is going to create some areas of snow along the eastern Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and even back toward the Anchorage Bowl. And then a secondary low will form and push into the Panhandle on Saturday night into Sunday, and that'll bring a renewed round of some moderate precipitation. Farther north and west, a weak low will track toward the Bering Strait into the Seward Peninsula and weekend, and that'll be it for early in the weekend. Then later this weekend, low pressure is going to come up out of the North Pacific and cross the Aleutians, the central Aleutians, on Sunday, and that'll push a stronger frontal system across the Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula later Sunday. That system will eventually, the low will move up into the lower Bering and then cross into the Gulf next week, early next week. And once that system strengthens, it's going to draw down some unseasonably cold air. Much below normal temperatures will overspread the mainland from north to south next week. So be aware of that pattern shift coming. But in the meantime, this weekend, a couple of lows in the Gulf and a weak dissipating low coming into the Seward Peninsula. And then by Sunday, another low in frontal system crossing there through the Aleutians up into the lower Alaska Peninsula. Now, Saturday afternoon, we're going to have some areas of IFR, perhaps Talkeetna Mountains along the Alaska Range, and then back up here into areas of the west central interior, Seward Peninsula and Bering Strait. Also a pocket of IFR possible around Wrangell on over toward Hyder. And then you can see the hints of that low beginning to appear, bringing IFR to the central Aleutians. And then for Sunday morning, we expect more in the way of widespread IFR conditions along and north of the Alaska Range, extending northwestward into the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, lower Chukchi Sea. Areas of IFR persisting there along the inner channels from perhaps around Wrangell down through Hyder again, and then that area of IFR increasing across the Aleutians and lower Bering in response to that low pressure system that will be crossing up into the lower Bering as we go through the day on Sunday. And then Sunday afternoon, improving conditions as that one system moves out. We should see improving conditions, largely VFR across the Panhandle Sunday afternoon. Also improving here, south central. Still some areas of MVFR in the interior, but not any IFR anticipated. Then IFR could persist from areas of Kotzebue Sound up along the Chukchi Sea coastline to Point Hope and Cape Lisburne. And then the low pressure will be working its way into the lower Bering Sunday afternoon and night with the arching frontal system extending into the Alaska Peninsula, where we expect areas of moderate to locally heavier precipitation along with extensive IFR conditions due to reduced visibility, lower ceilings with that precipitation. So looking at the passes here coming up Saturday, Anatuvik Pass, IFR becoming VFR. So IFR conditions there up through the east central Brooks Range early Saturday. Same thing, Adigan Pass, IFR becoming VFR. Now as we drop down into the west arm of the Alaska Range, IFR in the morning giving way to MVFR conditions, though IFR conditions could linger on the west side of the Alaska Range there during Saturday afternoon. As we go up, Rainy Pass generally staying in IFR conditions, and Windy Pass should largely be MVFR throughout the day Saturday, but as you pop out there in the north entrance, IFR conditions on the north and west side of the Alaska Range. Isabel Pass starting out IFR, becoming MVFR, and then farther east, Mentasta, enough so in the drier air, expect VFR conditions there. Dropping down into the Copper River Basin Saturday, MVFR conditions rather pervasive, and Tanita could see IFR conditions develop there Saturday afternoon. Portage Pass, kind of the reverse. IFR conditions will be in place over the eastern half of the pass, Prince William Sound area, Saturday morning giving way to MVFR conditions. And then finally up in the far north end of the Panhandle, we expect at Chilkoot and White, VFR conditions Saturday morning becoming MVFR during the afternoon into the evening. And looking at the freezing levels Saturday morning, the surface freezing line will run from the lower Bering just north of the central Aleutians up into Bristol Bay and snaking along the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, east side of the Kenai, on up along the Gulf Coast and then into the inner channels of the Panhandle. We see a bump in the freezing levels aloft from the lower Gulf down into the North Pacific to 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 feet. This is a baroclinic zone. This is where we have a change in the temperature. And as a result, this kind of highlights what the storm track is going to be shaping up to be later this weekend and next week. We're going to have that low come up into, as I mentioned on Sunday, crossing up in through the central Aleutians into the lower Bering, and then that low is going to track eastward. This boundary will get pulled a little further north, but once that low intensifies over the Gulf early next week, in through Wednesday, it's on the backside of the low that much colder air is going to overspread the mainland from north to south. So be aware, colder temperatures on the way as a result of that pattern shift. So Saturday, still some isolated moderate icing in areas of Kotzebue Sound and just north of the Yukon River. Also some pockets off the Kenai Peninsula and the Gulf, eastern Gulf into areas of the central southern Panhandle above 4,000 feet. And then as that front associated with the North Pacific low moves up into the Aleutians, there'll be a band of moderate icing potentially with that area of precipitation in the thicker cloud cover, producing that moderate to locally heavier precipitation above 3,000 feet. And looking at the jet stream winds aloft at 30,000 feet, we have a jet core of 150 knots on Saturday crossing the Alaska Peninsula. And this feature will work its way eastward, the jet core. As we look at the 9,000 foot or 700 millibar winds, pretty good belt of winds, lower Gulf, just off from Haida Gwaii southwestward to just south of the Alaska Peninsula, 65 to 80 knot jet core, just below that 150 knot jet core that's up there at 30,000 feet. And then as we bring it down to 3,000 feet, some pretty good winds out over the Gulf, anywhere from 40 to as high as 60 knots there in the central Gulf. And then back to the west, we see some stronger winds lifting out of the North Pacific up toward the Aleutians, 40 to 50 knot jet core, low-level jet core there associated with the frontal system and low that'll be tracking northeastward there by Sunday. So the greatest threat of turbulence then on Saturday will be over areas of the southwest. Along the west arm of the Alaska Range, the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, inland a bit, Kodiak Island, surface to 4,000 feet. Out over the Gulf, we could see surface to 6,000 feet here for the outer area of Prince of Wales Island there in the southern part of the Panhandle. Then in the far north, we could have some isolated moderate turbulence along the Arctic coast, especially from around Point Lay to Utqiagvik to just east of Dead Horse. Turbulence there, surface to 3,000 feet.